issues of racism, of xenophobia, anti-immigrant sentiment affects, the kinds of services and that they provide to children and to their families. And so those are.
Okay, welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for making time to come onto the Dalitalks show and talk about your journey and all the knowledge that you have to share with my community. How's your morning so far?
It is going really nicely. Morning, Michelle Espino Lira. I'm here in just a few minutes away from you, actually, which is kind of neat to always, to be able to connect with folks. I'm a professor, and we just finished spring break, and so it's nice to be. It's nice to not have to work a little bit, take some time off. It has been an intense time in college for so many college students. And so faculty too are being affected by the pandemic for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for your dedication to the education system and helping our young people and, well, everybody pretty much, get their education. I can only imagine what it's like teaching virtually right now, or even through those hybrid classes that are being offered. So tell us a little bit more about what you do. What do you specifically teach?
Well, I am a professor at a university here in the DC metro area. And my focus is on higher education. So I study Latino pathways to college and graduate school, and how we can get more of our gente to go into the professoriate. So what I do is I actually work strictly with graduate students. There are programs on college campuses that strictly focus on master's and doctoral students, and ours is one of them. We're a higher education, and it's called Student Affairs Administration. So we train folks who want to work on university campuses. And so often they will be people who work in the residence halls, people who coordinate campus activities, people who do academic advising. So there are a lot of different people who work on college campuses who actually get trained to work with college students and to be able to support them throughout the time that they're on a campus. And so I offer all of the foundational ways of thinking about how do we support our students, how do we help them to persist, and what are some of the barriers that people experience when they're trying to get to college and also to graduate school. So that is how I spend my time.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you've just taught me something so valuable because I went to grad school pretty much blind. Like I
Mm.
stumbled into it. Well, my professor, my academic advisor, pretty much told me like you need to do this, and I said okay because I wanted a master's anyway, but I didn't know what other options there were. But let
Mhm.
me backtrack a little bit
Yeah.
because I want people to know your background on how you
Mhm.
came to where you are now. So
Mhm.
can you share a little bit about maybe your upbringing and how that journey to college was for you?
Sure. So I am a first generation college student. I am a Tejana Chicana. So a shout out to all of my Texans out there, especially those on the borderlands. My dad immigrated from Mexico, and my mom was in West Texas. And so they happened to meet there. And my dad was in the military. So shout out to all of our military folks and veterans. And so we traveled my whole childhood from in the Air Force. And um, but I always knew I wanted to go to college. I did really well in I did really well in high school and was tracked. So there's a lot of work that talks about how Latino, Black and Brown kids will get tracked into certain tracks. So either they'll get tracked into an academic track where they can take honors classes and where they can take math and science, or they get tracked into vocational tracks where they don't always get the easier route to think about college. And so it's very unfortunate that students can get tracked as early as in sixth grade. to be thinking about whether they are college, quote unquote, college material. And so, so a lot of our gente end up being tracked in ways that don't give them access to the math classes and the science classes that they need in order to get into college. And so, yeah.
Okay, this is amazing. This shocks me because I didn't know it
Mhm.
was that early. And as a matter of fact, I didn't really know that this is something that does. It takes me back to my own experience. I
Mhm.
remember my counselor telling me to take easier courses, and I
Mhm.
had a period of time where I struggled with my assignments and my grades because of my
Mhm.
home life,
Mhm.
but I felt dumbed down. And now that
Yes.
you're
Mhm.
saying this, I'm like, oh my gosh, because I was so confident. So okay, when they're doing this, do you think that they're doing this purposely, or is it just like a system that was set up that say if A happens, then B needs to be the solution for this child. So this is what I'm gonna recommend.
Well, I think that there are some challenges with standardized testing. So, students are tested every single year, and I'm not exactly sure what's currently been happening with the pandemic, whether states are still requiring testing to happen. But I think those are some of the challenges is like people are automatically kind of use these scores to determine whether at what level students are reading, at what level students have math, acuity, like, so those are things that can become, challenges for students. And then they automatically decide, they probably should not be, put into quote unquote harder classes. Right. And so there, certainly I think there's larger systemic issues. I mean, I think there are challenges within our communities. I was talking with professor yesterday about how, if you're in a neighborhood where you're surrounded by refineries and the environment is toxic, like that's going to affect your development, right? That's going to affect your access that you have to a library or to like the structures that are in place in your neighborhood. And so those are not things that have to do with your family. They have things to do with how states and cities and townships are offering opportunities for the community. And so often I think issues of racism, of xenophobia, anti-immigrant sentiment affect, the kinds of services and that they provide to children and to their families. And so those are some of the things that I think about. I think you have counselors who, there's one counselor for 500 students. There's a lot of students who get, who go through the cracks because they aren't they're not acting up in school, but they're not in the honors program, right? So they, where's the direction and support for them? And I do feel for counselors who, yeah, they have a huge caseload, and so who are you going to focus on? So there's a lot of different issues that deal with the system that isn't necessarily specific to families, but we know that, access to opportunity is very limited if you are a Black or Brown student. And so, and depending on the neighborhood that you're in, and the, those opportunities. So, I mean, those are some of the challenges, and that can happen very early, unfortunately.
Yeah. So then for you, do you feel that that track was for your favor or against when you were coming up in school?
Well, I was certainly tracked into the academic track. So I had always moved in that direction. I was in honors English, and I had always thought I am going to college. And that's something that I think our families, even if they don't have never been to college, will say you're going to college. Now the challenge is, they have limited access to understanding how that process happens. How do you actually apply? Like you're going to go, but we're just hoping that somehow we'll get the information.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes schools assume that you're going to know the questions to ask that will help you, get to school, right? And so sometimes you're looking at a 16, 17-year-old student, traditional age student who is in high school and is trying to figure it out, especially for first gen students. And they are trying to interpret really complicated processes for their families. But they've been doing that their whole life, right? And I think that sometimes we don't look at the assets of our families.
Mhm.
No, we don't have necessarily knowledge about how to go to college, but we have built aspirations in our, that we believe in something, that we have worked hard so that our families, so to honor our families. That can be a stressor too. I don't want to, paint such a rosy picture, but I mean, there's, the dreams of our families we carry with us, and that helps us to succeed. The fact that many of our gente are able to code switch between English and Spanish, that is actually a skill. How we are able to, how many of us have answered the phone and interpreted for our families. How many of us have filled out forms for our families, right? So, those are things that I still do to try to interpret, because I'm the one who went to college, right? So I should know how to fill out these forms. And so all of these things are assets that we bring, but they're not valued by schools. They're not valued by colleges. And so, that's a shame. And that's something that we need to keep advocating for, that there are strengths within our families that are helping us to survive so much, and also to have these aspirations to go to college.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on something there that you said, even the families who don't have a background in previous college experience, like the parents, like for example, my mom, she dropped out her first semester of college in Nicaragua. So she came here and she always inculcated that idea of you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college. And yeah, she said that, but there was no plan because she didn't really understand how to even begin to look into it, especially coming to a country where the education is completely different.
Right.
So I remember getting to senior year and thinking, oh man, how am I going to get to it? How will I apply? How will I pay for it? And by then, my mom was single and I'm the oldest of six. So, of course, I thought, well, I made the decision without even asking her. Well, she's not going to pay for it. She can't.
Right.
So it's up to me now. So for me, my education and career path became the military. So, but there are people who don't want to do that. So there are other options, right? And so for people to understand how, say, your personal journey went, can you explain how you got started with that process of looking into colleges and what you learned that you had to do in order to get into a college?
Well, I went to college. So I have to add this caveat. I
Yes.
went to college when we didn't have the internet as a source. That's how long ago it was. I'm aging myself a little bit here. But I think one of the things that is really important are the college fairs. And sometimes people are unsure about, well, what am I supposed to talk about at the college fairs? And sometimes you don't have to worry about that as much, to just go and get the brochures and get the information that the admissions counselors can share. Each university has a set admissions counselor who is designated for that specific region or state, or local area. And so they have work to do. Their goal is to try to increase the number of applications. So they're always looking for folks to apply to their university or to their college. Community colleges run a little bit differently. So, this is where there is no admissions process. You can begin taking courses, you fill out an application and pay a fee. And then you can begin, your courses. So many of our community will go to community college first to get a lot of what are known as the basics. So those are courses that, are English or math, that you can transfer over to the local university. And a lot of the universities in your area have have agreements with the community college, that they will take certain courses. So you have to just let the community college know, I'm thinking about going to community college, getting my basics, and then transferring to X university, or the college in my neighborhood. And then they can get you on the transfer track. So there's also on community colleges, there's a lot of different tracks that you can get into, right? You can get into certification, you can, try to get an associate's degree, and that's specifically to specialize in a specific major, or you can say, I want to go, into the transfer track. And so you take courses that are specific to being able to transfer over to the university. So, and all of these community colleges and and four-year universities all offer financial aid, and that in itself is a huge challenge, unfortunately, because I mean, filling out that kind of paperwork. But one of the things, to go back a little bit, I did the college fairs, and I would get these brochures and I would look at them, and I was really interested at the time in science. I really thought I wanted to be a scientist. And so I was looking into specific schools that had science, but I didn't really know what to ask. I thought, well, do you have this major? And then maybe I will apply. And in Texas, it's a huge state. So you could want to go to the University of Texas, for example, and that's still like, 12 hours away from home. So it's, a little bit different when we think about it. And same thing with California. I would think, going up to Berkeley or Stanford or something like that, or San Jose State, like that's a little bit different than being down in San Diego. So that's a big difference. But I just, for me, I wanted to, I created my own spreadsheet, and I was like, okay, these schools have contacted me. This is how much their fees are. Usually people are, $50 to $75 per school. Sometimes you're able to waive that if you are an independent student or, are low income specifically.
And that's just for the application to see if
Mhm.
you can be admitted, right?
Yes. So that, becomes a challenge, right? You have to decide, where am I going to put my money? And, I think for me, some students are a little bit more savvy now where they'll apply to multiple schools. But you do have to have the money to be able to do that. There might be some programs that can offer where you can apply this called the Common Application. And the Common App, you can apply to multiple schools all at the same time. And the university will accept that particular application instead of having to do a specific application for every single university or college that you're interested in. And so that's some potential there. And so, but you have to decide, there's the schools, often people talk about, there's schools that you're going to get into, that no problem, that you can do it. There are schools that you're like, maybe. And then there's like the real reach schools that, wow, if I could get into this school, it would be incredible, right? And so, often students will think about applying to about 4 to 6 different schools if they're able to. And sometimes they apply to their local school, and that's great too. We just want to get people into college. I'm trying to remember how I did this. I applied to probably 3 or 4 different schools. Most of them were in Texas. And then there was one school in particular, St. Mary's University in San Antonio, that kept calling me. And at the time, that's what you do. They just kept calling me and asking me, do you need any help filling out the application? I want to talk to you about the kinds of activities that we do on campus. And I was like, who are these people? Like, why do they keep calling me? And so I thought, well, they must really want me. So I applied and I got a scholarship. And I said, once I got the scholarship, I said, that's it, I'm going. Like I still didn't have my full financial aid or anything like that, but I said, that was it. It was time for me to go. And a lot of times first generation college students don't, go far away from their homes. They're they like to stay with their family, or would prefer to just kind of stay in the local area. And I was going 10 hours away, a completely different time zone, to go to college. And at the beginning, my parents are really worried. You don't know anybody. If you needed help, we're too far to help you. And so there was a lot of fear. But I went to a very small private Catholic university, where we had, I think at the time, I think we were maybe 2,000 undergraduates. So it was very small. Everybody lived on campus. I lived on campus all 4 years. I didn't think about living in an apartment. I didn't have a car. Um, I just, it was the right place for me. And so I think that's also to think about is, you know, people would tell, I went to, so I got accepted, right? And I got the scholarship. Um, and then you also, once you decide that this is a school that you want to go to, you actually have to put a down payment. And usually it's called the matriculation fee. And it's usually, well, at the time, I mean, it can be very expensive. It can be anywhere from 150 to 300 to $500 that you put down to say, I'm committed to the university. And so at that point, then things start rolling and you start thinking about going to orientation, and which usually happens in the summer or in the winter if you're transferring. And it's helping you to see all of the different resources that are on campus. You meet with the financial aid to just review the package that you've been given. They usually send you a package, and it becomes very complicated, but it's important to fill out the free application for student financial aid, which is known as the FAFSA. Um, and the FAFSA can be very difficult to talk with families, especially if you're a first generation college student, because the FAFSA relies on your family's taxes to make a determination about how much your family can contribute to your college education. And so sometimes families can be very fearful or hesitant about sharing their tax forms with the university, because it's like, or with the government, because really the FAFSA is run through the Department of Education. And so that can be a challenge. And sometimes it's really difficult to see, like, what's the difference between grants versus loans? What does it mean to have an unsubsidized versus a subsidized loan? They're having to navigate all of this language, plus scholarships. And so those are some challenges that to figure out. You have to kind of build your own spreadsheet about, this is how much college is telling me that they're going to cost. And this is how, if I take out loans, this is what I'm going to owe when I graduate. And a lot of students don't realize that you actually are going to owe that money when you're done with school. Some loans that universities offer, you actually have to keep paying while you're in school. And then you can also potentially get work study, which pays you, it's kind of an on-campus job, that pays you a small stipend and helps to pay for school. You can also do the grants. If you are a low-income student, you might be able to qualify for a Pell Grant. So there's all these different kinds of grants. So having to maneuver through all of that financial aid and can be very challenging for students. And it can be very scary because you are signing an agreement that this is how you're going to pay for school. And it can be challenging to do that.
So I'm going to recap because you just threw out a lot of words that
I did.
What? I didn't know this either when I got to college. And I got to college when I was in my early 30s because military, I did do actually a lot of college while in the military, but I didn't know how to structure my academic career. So I didn't even get a degree. I had like 130 some credits when I got out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, oh, I was just taking all these courses, which were great, but no degree. So I get out and I had to pretty much start all over again because I didn't know this. If they're so many years old, you have to retake that course again. And I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. So you said subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And that is really are they always federal loans? Or
the ones that are offered usually through FAFSA, yes, they are. And they actually go at a lower percentage rate than loans from a bank. Right. So for example, you could be paying anywhere from 3 to 4% interest versus potentially like 8 to 14%. But there's a lot of challenges with this right now, right? The cost of college continues to go up. And some of this is because historically, public universities were funded by the state, and they were funded much more by the state. And as the years have gone by, the states have not paid as much to these universities, and so they're having to figure out, how do we still offer quality education, but we're having to make this up. And so one of the most guaranteed ways of ensuring that quality of education continues is by increasing students' tuition every year. And so somehow, unfortunately, with especially cost of living and everything, the rates have gone significantly higher. And so there's a lot of conversation right now about the cost of education. We have a new Department of Education secretary who is going to be hopefully addressing this, but students are leaving with significant loan debt and have no hope potentially of paying that off in their lifetime. And that is a significant concern. But there's also for-profit colleges that unfortunately are taking advantage of Black and Brown communities, of low-income communities, that actually are not they're kind of thought of as much more predatory. So so I think those are the things that to be thinking about is it may look on paper like a for-profit college will get you done faster, but you're also having to take out significant loans, and they don't have the kind of funding structure that like a university would have. So those are some challenges there with that as well. But there's also additional costs, right? So it's not just tuition. You might have be thinking about room and board, living on campus. You might, your books every year. How much are those costing? Eating on campus, like, it's things that are the lab fees. So many students have to take, chemistry, for example. And so now you've got to pay for the lab fee to be able to do that. So there's a lot of these hidden costs that people are like, I thought we were going to pay for this, but no, actually you're paying also for gas money, right, to get to campus, or transportation, or whatever it is, and then additional student fees.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you pointed that out, because that too was a surprise to me. While I didn't have to pay lab fees, I did know that certain chemistry or biology classes required a specific lab that required an additional fee, and they were not very small fees. They were like almost $100. And the books was a big shocker too. I remember having to take a business law class, and the darn books were 200, and compared to other students, that was cheap, because there are other courses where it requires purchasing the book. The other thing that I found out was that while in the syllabus, you usually get it a few days before class starts, maybe a week, and the syllabus had listed all the books. And so I'd go out and try to be ready, being that good student, and go get them, and then come to find out that they weren't going to use them, or that
that's frustrating.
so then sometimes you could return them within a few days, but sometimes you couldn't, and there I was stuck with those books that were very expensive. And when it came to resell them, you don't get your money back. And there were students who also rented out their books, which was a new thing when I went to college in the early 2010, 9, 10. So I'm sure things have changed. But you also mentioned, so we touched on unsubsidized and subsidized loans, and then there's grants, which is money you don't pay back, scholarships, which you also don't pay back either. And one that I really want to address is the Pell Grant. How is the Pell Grant different than FAFSA? I actually thought that they that's like the same word being used for the same type of benefit, financial benefit.
Well, the FAFSA is the actual like application that you submit for financial aid, and once they figure out that you have to, there's a certain calculation that they figure out if your family is low income, or let's say you are an independent student and aren't making any money, that that you can potentially qualify for a Pell Grant. And the Pell Grant usually is about like 5,900 or so per year, or it might be per semester. I'm not completely sure. I don't want to give false information, but you can get up to that amount. And then and so the Pell Grant, is specifically for low income students.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you for
Mhm.
clarifying that. So
Mhm.
then, just trying to recap on your journey, you ended up going to St. Mary's and you graduated from
Yeah,
there. Did your education journey end there?
no. So it did not. So, as I was very involved on campus, and in and I was fortunate that I could do that. I did work study. And scholarships can be challenging because if you don't meet a certain grade point average, you can actually lose your scholarship. So that is a challenge, and that becomes a little bit of a stressor for students. And unfortunately, I did not. I ended up not being able to keep my scholarship. Um, I was in science. I did not do well in my science classes, and ended up needing to change my major. And so after I changed my major, it made much more sense. I was doing international relations work, and many of my friends were saying, well, I need to go to grad school. Like, this is something that, to get a specialty. So often undergrad gives you a very kind of general experience. You're learning about, English, you're learning about literature, you are kind of, focusing on, getting some math skills, you're taking the science. Like, it's very, the general education curriculum offers a variety of ways to think about the world, right? We're trying to develop a global, global community. And so courses are being offered that help you to do that. And then you have your major, which helps you to specialize in a particular area. Um, and so, but sometimes people want even more specialization, and they want to get more, deeper into a particular subject. And so a master's program helps you to do that specifically. It gives you professional training, like, for example, an example would be going to law school, for example. So maybe you were a political science major as an undergrad, and now you want to translate that knowledge to going to law school. And law school helps you to develop the skills as a professional, to be a lawyer, right? To be an attorney. So that's exactly what a master's degree can do. Although a law degree is also known as a terminal degree. So you don't have to get any more education after that. You get the JD, and you're done. But with the master's program, you specialize in a particular area. And for me, I really wanted to be a university administrator. I loved my time on campus. People invested in me, they cared about me, and I wanted to do the same for other college students. And so this time I applied. Well, I ended up only applying to maybe one or two schools, which I do not recommend. So at the time I thought this will be fine. I'll apply to one school, and we'll go from there. And I was fortunate that I got into grad school, but still have to take, to get to college, sometimes you have to take the SAT or the ACT, um, which are the scholastic aptitude test. And it, kind of measures whether you're going to be successful in the first semester of your first year in college. And same thing with the GRE. So, or the GMAT, depending on, what kind of, degree you're going into. But it's another graduate measurement of your aptitude, to get into school. And people use that as a cutoff. And now there's a lot of conversations happening about what is the purpose of these tests, and what are they really telling us outside of how successful you can be in your first semester. It doesn't necessarily measure your perseverance. It doesn't measure your aspirations, and so why are we really using that? And there's a lot of evidence that talks about it. It isn't designed for Black and brown communities. It isn't designed for low income communities. And so you're likely to score not that well if you don't fit, this specific criteria within the exam. And so I know in our program, we've thought a lot about, what is the purpose behind the GRE for us? What are we really gaining from understanding that we can't gain from a transcript, a letter of recommendation, a student's personal statement? And so we've decided to eliminate the GRE from our admissions. And programs can do that individually. So for us, the application process is very similar to college. You have letters of recommendation, but this time you want letters of recommendation from faculty who were from your undergrad. Maybe you want it from a supervisor who supports, if you want to go part-time, who supports the fact that you want to go to school. But mostly from faculty, you want to show who you are in the classroom. You write a personal statement that helps people understand, why do you want to get a master's degree? What is it that it's going to help you with doing, and why our school in particular? And then your transcripts. And sometimes people ask for a writing sample just to see, is this person, can they effectively communicate in writing? And then they will make some decisions about interviewing. So in graduate school, the often the programs are much smaller. So you're looking at like for us, we're a little bit different, but a lot of schools take about 40 students maybe a year. We take significantly less than that. So we take probably 20 master's students. And some of our decisions is like, we're, because of our advising load. So every single faculty member gets assigned to someone that they advise. And we interview folks and we ask them, we try to figure out, is this someone that really fits with our program and what we're planning, how we really feel like what are their goals and how do they match with us? And so those are some of the things that we think about with master students. And then often with master students, you get what are called graduate assistantships. And those where you can work on campus, and it will pay for tuition. It will pay for, and it'll give you a stipend. Not a lot of money, but enough that to prohibit, like to help you not have to like work multiple jobs. Although we do have students who end up having to do that because cost of living can be really high. And they have to pay for apartments or whatever. But usually that pays for tuition, which is a big part, and that includes out of state. So for a lot of students, they're saving a lot of money by doing that.
Yeah, I remember having some assistant professors, or no, they were called kind of like teachers' assistants. And I remember them telling me that they were students there who were working as the assistant, and they would sometimes come in and were the ones doing the lectures and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So they were being paid, and it would kind of offset some of the costs, which I found to be interesting because I'd never heard of that before.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you've given us so much information, and
I
I know
have, I'm sorry.
no, it's great. And I know that this is probably overwhelming for someone watching, but yeah, if people who are watching want to learn more and need more resources, where can they reach out to you?
Oh, well, me specifically, huh?
Or yeah, what resource, where would you send them to?
Well, I mean, there's certainly, some really good places to think about. I mean, the graduate school that they're interested in, would be certainly a place to start. And it also depends on what kind of program you want to go into. So that's what becomes a little bit tricky. But I think the first step, if you are going to college currently, and it is to talk with your academic advisor about, I'm thinking about going to graduate school. Can you help me, figure out that process? And also, because you can also look up the U.S. News and World Report every year publishes, I think many of you may have seen like the best colleges in the, in the country, but they also publish the best graduate schools, and they can tell you the best graduate schools. They can also tell you the best programs within specialization. So if you're interested in education, they will list, the top 50 education schools, and then you can look more in depth into, teacher education, or in my case, higher education. And so I know our higher education program is ranked number 10 in the country. And so, and then at that point you can, and my specific program that I specialize in with university administrators, called Student Affairs, is the number one program in the country. And so so sometimes we offer opportunities for students to contact us through email. And so I do recommend that. Faculty are always open to talking to folks who are interested in going into grad school. And there are also, other graduate students who can help with explaining the procedures. So each university does it differently, but I do recommend the U.S. News and World Report as a potential option to get some ideas, at least get started with that.
Yeah, perfect.
Mhm.
Wow, thank you so much. You've taught me so much, and I already went through grad school. And it was tough because I didn't know about a lot of the resources. I had to pretty much learn as I went, which made it a little stressful. So if all of this information can help somebody, relieve some of the stress, this would be one of those that is just unnecessary to have, because the knowledge is out there. You just have to ask questions. And I understand that sometimes we don't know what to ask.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, by asking one little question, it can lead to so many others. So I appreciate you making the time to come onto the Dalitalks show, educating my viewers, and just letting us know that there's a lot more out there to offer.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, certainly you can check out my podcast, Latinx Intelligentsia. You can find us at Latinx Uplift on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So we can certainly help you think about that, and have some wonderful Latinx, Latina, Latino role models who, are in grad school, are, getting that doctorate. Just really, really encouraging and inspirational.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you mentioned the podcast. Because yeah, that's free resources right there. So definitely, if you're watching this, make sure you follow Michelle's podcast, and I'm sure that they can they send you any questions on social media or anything? Should I add that?
Yes, sure thing. Yeah, and use Latinx Uplift, and I'm very happy to address any questions that folks may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wow, Michelle just taught me so much. And again, I've been through college already. There's so many moving parts of the application process. There's so many different pathways to your educational career and to your actual trade or whatever it is you're going to do for work in your lifetime. So don't forget, she said you can always check out the U.S. News and World Report for the top schools in the country, and you can start from there. But always go to an advisor, even if it's not your advisor. If you just know somebody at school can help you with more knowledge about how to navigate that space, how to get to college, how to go to graduate school, there are people out there that are willing to help. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, click like. Don't forget to tap that little bell so that you're alerted every time that I publish a new video. And come on to Dalitalks.com and subscribe to my newsletter so that you're notified about upcoming events, upcoming guests, and so that you can get free additional resources. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.